Let's all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rena will issue the two new members in, take oath of office.
I invite Dwayne and Councilman Town to step down here in front of the council. Yes. Dwayne, you've done this before.
Yes, I have.
Great. Raise your right hand and read those things.
I need the glasses.
I, Dwayne Wilbring, do solemnly swear or affirm that I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of Minnesota, that I will discharge faithfully the duties of the office of counselor in the city of Rockville, the state of Minnesota, to the best of my judgment and ability.
Thank you. Welcome. Congratulations again. You guys want to sign these and give them back to me. Thank you.
Okay, next item is roll call. Everyone is present now that they're sworn in. Do we have any additions to the agenda, Rena?
No, we do not, Mayor.
Okay. Next item, open forum. Anybody wish to speak? Come forward to the podium. Okay. Next item, consent agenda.
I would make a motion to approve as presented.
I'll second that motion.
Motion been made and second.
Mr. Mayor,
Further
discussion?
discussion?
Sure.
Go ahead, Dwayne. And then-
Okay, one quick one. Maybe Rena, you could help us out. I see on the fire department under the billing, that would be under here, yes, under treasurer. So there's a mini Exxon. Is that something that I hadn't heard before? It's a $983.96. As I was cruising through the bills, I just happened to see that. Is that a?
Is that something they just bought in December?
It looks like it was. Well, it was invoiced January 14th, or it
Right,
was.
but it was for 2014.
Yeah.
What that was, piece of equipment that they absolutely needed. Their other one had went kaput.
Okay, so the old one, we had one in the past, and it
Yes.
just wore out, and it was deemed to have a new one. Falls under less than $1,000, so it doesn't take council action.
Okay.
Rick?
Yes, under list of bills payable, I've been attending council meetings for quite a while, and it always kind of puzzled me under bills payable when there's nothing in the comments. And under the bills payable tonight, there are 20 payments listed with nothing in the comments. These bills total $332,000, $272.77. I can see that $278,579 of this are to pay bonds to Northland Trust Services. And I would just like clarification to know what bonds they're paying. I would have a problem paying, the reason I'm asking this, if there's no comments in there, I don't understand what I'm approving. I'm approving $332,000 of payments with nothing in the comments. And that, I wouldn't do that. The reason I'm saying this is if I got a credit card statement and I don't understand the charge that's on that statement, I'm going to question it. So I'm requesting staff at least put comments in for each bill payable.
All right,
Can I just say though, I mean, and maybe this is just because you haven't, but the account code is listed, so we know what fund it's coming out of, and maybe you don't have that detail since you're new, and I also feel like it's staff's responsibility to make sure that we're paying accurately and the right bond payments, so it becomes that question between what's a management function and what's the council function. But I mean, I think we do know what funds they're coming out of because the account codes are on there. But,
Okay, you're absolutely correct. I do not understand the codes.
yeah.
And when the public looks at this, when I was coming as the public and I pulled up the council packets and I would see this, the public would have no idea what those account codes are, just like I don't have any idea right now. So it's a reasonable request, I feel, to have comments in there stating what the bills are paying. Agreed or no?
CenturyLink, that, is phone, but you
Well,
wanna know
obviously.
which area?
Right, just which one it's paying for. Cold Spring Record, there's 3 bills, 2 have listing what they're for and 1 does not. Like I said, all the Northland Trust services, what bonds are they paying? Are they paying the water fund bond, the bond for City Hall, the Fire Hall? Just a simple comment in there stating what bond they're paying, I
Okay,
think would be reasonable.
certainly we can do that, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Also in the consent agenda, there's trying to see if this is all, I was trying to throw this together, I was out of state and I just got back in state just within hours ago. In the consent agenda, is there also the cash statement balance? Is that part of the consent agenda? The way this is organized in there.
Cash balance statement, it's right after Exhibit D. See that?
See, my folder has
Tab
1, 2,
4.
3, 4, 5, 6, doesn't have D.
Well, it's all under tab 4,
Okay,
so it was right in front of the bills payable.
okay. So
Actually,
on the
Rick,
cash,
and on there, like Fund 310 is the 2009 utility disposal portion. So that you do have that with you at all time too, just to say, Fund 311, which you're talking about those bond payments, so when, Mandy writes that down there, 311 or whatever, there's another quick reference for you,
okay,
all right?
all reasonable.
So she might have to abbreviate something, because I don't know, there's a whole lot of room for comments, but we certainly will expand on that.
Yeah. The account summary with the cash balance statement, what I was trying to look for there, last summer, there was a refunding bond taken out for the Pleasant Lake Water Tower of $550,000. I couldn't see that in the cash balance statement, so I was wondering where that money is at.
Well, if that's the water tower, it's under Fund 601.
On 601, it's not listed in the cash balance statement though. That's what I looked all over for $550,000 and I can't see it. If you could just point me to that. If I'm missing it, then I perused over it a little too quickly, but
I don't think
Are you looking for a balance of that?
where
They're
is,
set into an escrow account, so no, we don't have that money. It's held somewhere else.
it's held somewhere else?
Yep.
Okay, then that answers the question.
Yep.
We have that. Under the fee schedule that is part of the consent agenda, I'm sorry. The fee schedule for administrative charges, it's listed at $25 and that was changed last year to $50.
So we changed it back. Yeah, it's 25.
It's back to 25. When did that get moved and changed?
The council did it at one meeting and it's been changed or left into the fee schedule as that.
Okay, I was not aware of that change. Under the committee assignments, let's see, that's not part of
Separate
the
issue.
consent agenda, right? Okay. Is there a possibility when the meeting minutes are summarized and under the open forum, when somebody speaks, when they take the time, I know it's not comfortable for everybody to get up to the open forum and speak, but sometimes the translation of what somebody's trying to speak is not really related when it's summarized in the meeting minutes. I was wondering if there's some way that we could have the summary made and let the person that spoke agree that it conveys what they were speaking about. Because I, for one, I've spoken many times at the open forum, and what I was portraying at the open forum stand did not represent what was written in the minutes. And I think that's kind of unfair. There's no way for people to really agree with what is actually put in the minutes. It's hard enough for a lot of people to get up there and speak. At least it should be portrayed in the minutes accurately to what they're trying to say. Also, in the meeting minutes, page 1, Attorney Ripple also presented his revised version of the third-party contract. Instead of third-party contract, you have for RD. Instead of third-party, it says board party. Just a misspelling. And I know Dwayne is aware of this. I don't know if the rest of the council is aware of this. While I was part of the Ricori Trail Construction Board, Martin Bodie, who is the city administrator of Richmond, had brought up that the council should not approve the treasurer's report. We should accept it, but not approve it. If we approve the treasurer's report, we are in a sense co-signing for all of those statements. I don't have enough information available to me of all the finances that I am going to co-sign on any of that. So I will accept a treasurer's report. I will not approve a treasurer's report.
Mr. Mayor, could I just make a quick comment? In the upcoming League of Minnesota City training, they drill into that quite a bit, and it's ACCEPT, not EXC, but ACC, ACCEPT, and that was a ruling some years ago, and it was brought up in there, and it's very relevant in this case. So quite frankly, when we make a motion and we accept the consent agenda as presented, that's the proper, rather than to approve the consent agenda. So for those of us who make motions, when it gets to the consent agenda, the logical choice of words would be to accept. That would imply that we're accepting the report that's presented, but we're not documenting or verifying that the actual content of it is accurate.
Right.
I believe that's what I sense Councilmember Tallman's
Well,
sharing.
Dwayne, what you're saying is I
Word
think
accept.
of what I heard Rick say is he's conditioning accepting the treasury report. I didn't hear him say he's not approving the consent agenda. You said accepting the consent
Yeah.
agenda, so you're taking it one step further,
Just
that we shouldn't, their language should be accept the consent agenda, and therefore everything underneath the consent agenda is
Is
accepted
accepted.
but not approved.
yeah, same, just the choice of words.
Yeah, I would agree. He's maybe had a little more in-depth training on that than I was just taking Martin Bodie at his word at the Recorded Trail Construction
It
Board.
doesn't make total sense to me because I'm looking at tonight, like, it says approve the 2015 fees and calendar, and that actually seems like that is a function of the council to approve it.
Approve.
So I think we probably have to be careful about what we say we're either accepting or approving.
And if I follow up, Mr. Mayor, and that it would be that the word accept, if that is accepted by, or if that's protocol that is established by our administrator later that says accept the minutes and accept the treasurer's report so that we are not verifying it. That's what an audit does. An audit will actually verify and approve it. And so if we have an audit, whenever it happens, and that audit, that we accept the auditor's report. That's the stamp of approval that we get it. So I think this is just a small little, but we'll get some training. I'll ask it. I'm going to be at a two-day training, and I'll ask down there. So before next month, we'll have it. And so today, when we get to that, when the consent agenda, whoever makes that, I think it's appropriate if we would just say to accept the consent agenda, then the problem goes away.
Or we could pull the treasurer's report,
Yeah,
the list
right.
of bills, and put that under its
Yeah.
own separate thing, and that you can accept. Leave the other as approved.
Yeah, accept the treasury's report,
I would agree.
pull that aside, and then
Yeah.
approve all the rest. Okay, but
Great.
Member
We'll do that
Palmer
also,
brings
but
up a good point, and that is if we are approving the minutes as presented, or if we accepting the minutes as presented in the consent agenda of those A through G to have a flow, and it's just merely changing one word and we're still accomplishing the end result, it's a small little price to pay.
What- Can we just change B and, you're gonna change B and C to accept from approve?
Sure.
And then we can approve the consent agenda?
And by next month,
And then we'll get an answer on what the proper, okay. Okay, proper to have that in a motion to amend the consent agenda to change the wording from approve to accept treasury report and from approve to accept list of bills and additions. I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and second to approve the consent agenda, subject to changing terminology to accept treasury report, accept list of bills in addition. Any further discussion? Otherwise, all in favor, say aye.
aye.
Opposed, same. Motion passes. Okay, board and staff report. John, police report?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. This will be a report for the month of December, last month of 2014. There were 36 contract hours in December, 2 citations written. The first one was a combination citation for no proof of insurance and careless driving. The second citation was for expired registration. Call types for the month, I didn't see anything that stood out too much. A couple of property damage accidents, 4 alarms, no problem at any of those alarms. There was 1 alcohol compliance check done at, is it Buds and Bugs or?
Bugs,
Okay.
Bugs and Buddy.
And it passed. You see disorderly conduct there. That was out on Lake Road. There was a couple of calls at the same address on Lake Road that are all somewhat related and involve the same people. The dog complaint was a loose dog that was returned to the owner. Illegal dumping complaint was again on Lake Road involving the same people that we're dealing with out there. There were 2 DWI arrests in December. Both of those were blood tests, so the citations are pending on those. The hazard was deer and a cow. A couple of stalled vehicles, a couple of suspicious vehicles, 34 traffic stops, 2 vehicles in the ditch. Considering it's winter, that's not too bad for us. Welfare check was 1057 or intoxicated male found walking on the road, and then there was 1 request for extra patrol.
Hey, John, any questions? Anybody?
John, I had, did a little research, and from what I found, if a theft of property is over $1,000, that would be considered a felony?
I'd have to go back and consult state statute. There are different levels, different thresholds for property, and I don't typically commit those to memory. We go back and consult the criminal elements book to figure out what level we're at. It was changed a couple of years ago, and I'd have to go back and verify. But yeah, there's a level. It's either 1,000 or 2,500, somewhere in there.
Okay. Because back in November, I had brought up an issue here that a piece of city equipment was missing. And it was stated that it was discovered missing after a certain employee had left here. The replacement cost of that piece of equipment was $1,330 roughly. So I had asked if there was any report or anything made for such a expensive piece of equipment missing. And I think there should be a little
there was one.
investigation done.
Yep. There
Did
was
you
one done.
report that to the sheriff's department or?
No, after I found out what the value was of the ones that was lost, one was an actual made-up one of pieces of different things that Roger had made. And the other one was an older meter, Don. I talked to Don, talked to Roger, and it was under $1,000, well under 1,000.
But it was still missing.
Yep. What's that? He was either at one or two sites. One at a construction site, the other at another event.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, John. Next item is Fire Department appoint officer 2015 and wage. That's Human Resources, so we'll take care of that.
All right, so we had applicants for the firefighter positions, and so here's the slate for 2015. So it would be Rodney Schaefer as chief, and it's actually, they go on a 4-year term, so Rodney has 2 years left, so his term would expire in 2016. Don Simon to be appointed to first assistant chief, and that position would go until 2018. Tim Mossman as second assistant chief, that position expires in 2016. And Andrew Struffer as secretary treasurer, and that position would expire in 2018. And along with that, we are also requesting the appointments and then also the associated pay. So the chief is $2,000, the first assistant chief is $1,250, the second assistant chief is $1,000, secretary treasurer is $1,500. Rodney will be appointing 2 captains, and that is his duty to do that. He will do that Monday night, and those are $500 each. The wages were approved at the last council meeting. I believe we talked about this salary scale for the firefighters. So I would make a motion to approve the appointment of officers.
I'll second that motion.
Motion been made and second to approve the officer positions. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same.
I'll abstain.
Motion passes. Don Simon abstains. Thank you, Sue. Next item, Planning Commission, Bill.
Mayor, council, bear with me, this will be my first time doing this. We have, on the first was the David and Marlene Molitor variance. This requires 2 variances on a non-conforming lot. That was in place before the ordinance was adopted. Proper temporary and permanent erosion control shall be implemented. This request for approval of 2 variances in the shoreland. The Planning Commission held a public hearing and recommends approval with conditions, as I just stated, being taken care of, and also that no camper is to be restored there once the house is built. So we do recommend approval of that.
This required 2 variances, one from the front yard and one from the rear yard.
Could both variances be granted at the same time, or should
Yes,
they take separate
yeah.
action? I make a motion to accept the Rockville Planning and Zoning recommendations to approve it with those conditions that they advanced to us. And that's on the David and Marlene Molitor variance request for both variances.
I'll second that motion.
A motion been made and second to approve the recommendation to allow these 2 variances. Any further discussion?
Here.
Rick, go ahead.
I'm questioning the restriction after they build the home, they can't park an RV on there?
Correct.
For purposes other than storage.
They can park one, they can't occupy it.
Live in it.
Well, that's what I had heard. I
Yep.
heard they couldn't park one, and I thought, well, if somebody builds a house and they have an RV, they can't park it at their house? I couldn't.
Yeah, you can park it, you can't live in it. That was really the intent, because they have had a camper on the lot previously, and that's actually not allowed per our ordinance to live in a camper. So we just wanted to be clear. I was at
Thank
the
you.
planning commission, so.
Okay.
Okay, a motion's been made and second to approve. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion passes.
The second item on the agenda was the James and Elizabeth Althouse and Charles and Cheryl Unger to rezone. This joint project is quite unique, and both property owners are thinking of doing the same thing at the same time. What they would like to do is request to rezone two abutting properties to RR. This is the area of the city where RR should most definitely be considered. This is what the planning commission has done and recommends approval. The petitioners will return at the next month's meeting for subdivision approval. We do recommend approval on this. I believe Mr. Willenbring and Susan Palmer were there for this.
Yeah. And I would make a motion to accept, to grant the,
I'll second that. And that's to rezone.
To rezone.
To an RR. And if, Mr. Mayor, if I could, this is a prime example of what the RR was intended for. The Planning and Zoning member commission had worked feverishly. Sue had the oversight of that during that process. And so here's a fine example of what the RR was intended. And so it's a no-brainer for me at least to vote in this one.
Bill, is there a replatting involved here or not, or is it just
There will be a subdivision after this.
after
It
this?
took them two separate months so that we
Okay.
get it, wrap our arms around it.
Yeah. The signal that we'd be sending if we vote in favor of it is that the council agrees that this is legitimate to have an RR, not go through all that effort and then we wouldn't rezone it. So that's truly, it's the same piece of property. It's,
yeah.
Did we at one time kind of do a future land use planning that it's designated some areas that were
Yep.
right for, and this falls in that area?
Yep.
Okay,
Quite a few years, or a couple of years ago.
Yes, we did, yes.
okay.
Okay.
Okay,
There's no opposition from any of the neighbors out there then either?
Nope.
Okay.
okay. I forget now, do we have a second first and a second?
yeah, I seconded.
Okay. A motion been made second to approve the rezoning from agricultural to rural residential. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion passes.
I'll say aye with little hesitation. I don't have a lot of background on it, but I'll
Approve?
I'll
Okay.
approve with.
Motion passes unanimously then?
The third on the planning commission was the Michael Roth impervious surface and shoreland setback. The council sent this back to the planning commission. There was a lot of discussion in regards to, and also the owner did come back with a slight variance to be 30 feet back. After much discussion, the planning commission denied his request, voted to deny.
Mayor and council, can I add that Mr. Roth, I don't know that he's here. He did email me today, and I did include that in your packets. If you want, I can read it into the record. I may not make the meeting on Wednesday due to a commitment with a client in Detroit Lakes. That being said, I still would like to see my variance get approved. I get that if you look at the ordinance from the black and white perspective, the answer is no. If every request was reviewed this way, there would be no need for a variance process. In my humble opinion, I'm asking the council to look at the reasonableness of my request. I have compromised and moved the shed back from shore despite it being less convenient. In my opinion, my backyard is large compared to many on the lake, and there are mitigating factors to the pure 50-foot setback ordinance. For example, I'm willing to include some grasses and native plants into the plan and to help protect the lake. I have been a resident of the lake since 1988 and a member of the Grand Lake Association for many of those years. I do not want to harm the lake. So,
I would make a motion to deny his request, accepting the planning commission's recommendation.
Well, it's basically because it's too close to the shoreline, or what about now he's moving it back yet also? And he's, like you stated, let he plant grass and stuff.
It's still, I believe, 20 feet within the 50-foot setback.
No, was there I believe the last councilman, he said there was no opposition from the neighbors to him putting it there? Or am I wrong on
That is, we didn't hear any opposition at the public hearing.
It's, Don, it's in violation of our shoreline ordinance, which requires structures to be at least 50 feet back from the water. And the reason we do that is because structures like that close to the water, will have a tendency, a risk of contaminating the water just due to runoff from shingles, runoff from paint. Often storage in these kind of buildings is petroleum products, gas for their boat motor, stuff like that can easily spill. So that is why, almost without exception, lakes in the state of Minnesota, probably countrywide, try to do away with boathouses that generally sit very close to the water, and boats are used to roll up. And so they're trying to do is put these structures, a critical distance away from the lake. So if there is runoff, or if there is an accident, there's plenty of ground between there and the water to hopefully absorb that contaminant that might get into the lake. And the reasons we grant variances is if there's a hardship, and generally that around a lake that might occur if you have a very small lot and there's really no place else to put something like this. So we try to accommodate somebody that wants to have a structure like that. But in the case of Mike Roth, who's got a very large lot, and is, rereading what Rena just read, I mean, it's less convenient to move it 50 feet. Well, less convenient isn't really a hardship. And so I think the planning commission is justified in their recommendation.
In your appraisal business, that is kind of statement with other lakes, basically a policy, right? Or they do it in most of your bigger lakes?
Most lakes, in fact, I'm on Leech Lake. Leech Lake is 115,000 acres. Grand Lake is 670 acres. Leech Lake is 75 feet away, so they're even more restrictive than the city of Rockville. And I think the city of Rockville probably did 50 feet just because of the constraint of the roads around the lake, that we probably couldn't accommodate people at 75 feet.
If I could make a comment, and I somebody that's more authoritative than I am, or more versed, and I guess the question, or the reason I had pushback last month, and that was the fact that under what authority do we have it? Because as I understand it, the building is not a structure, because it's not permanently fastened to, either affixed to as in the state code, and or if it's a pole structure that the poles are in. And that's, I think, where I had the pushback. And so by what value, it's just like a doghouse, I'll just use that as a for instance. Do we really analyze where that doghouse will be on that piece of property? It just happens to be a little bit larger, and the contents, as the mayor stated, is different. So there should be some value that we look at that. But under what authority do we have the right to have a structure that's not affixed to the ground? That's the question.
Well, I mean, if that's, I disagree. I mean, it's because I feel like you're trying to do a workaround what the intent of our ordinance was, and that is that we're not creating additional impervious surface by the lake. So to me, it doesn't matter whether it's fixed or it's movable, because frankly, I highly doubt that it's going to be moved. I mean, the intent is, and so if we need to clarify a definition, Dwayne, then maybe that needs to be added.
Yeah.
But I think the real intent is to say, we're not having structures that create impervious surface within the first 50 feet within the shore.
Some of the discussion.
And again, if I could just follow up, that's from the profession that I came from, and that's why I bring that forward. Is it a structure or is it not, and by what authority? If we have that authority to be able to do that, then, then obviously I don't stand. So anyways, good dialogue though.
Bill, did you have a response before we go to?
Well, just back when we were looking at the ordinance, people were talking about, some folks will build a fish house and set it down there, and it's gonna sit there forever, and frankly, I think we have some of that in the past, so just to answer Mr. Willenbring's question.
Yeah, I think maybe that's something we need to look at, have the planning commission look at movable structures if our ordinance needs to be tightened.
I think it's in there, I just can't
Tighten up a
recall.
little bit.
Yeah. And maybe to get some clarity on that, the definition of what is a structure.
Okay, Rick?
The comment I had looked at a similar type of structure down on my shoreline, and I'm on a very steep shoreline on Pleasant Lake. And when I had looked at the county level, they allow a building within 15 feet of the ordinary high water mark. And we're requiring 50 feet? I wonder why the county would allow a structure within 15 feet. And
I don't think that's, ours is from the water?
First of all, we don't follow the county, and I
Right.
think that they have changed that, but I don't know for sure. So,
It has been a few years since
Yeah.
I checked that, but that's what I had looked at that point, because I was wanting some type of small
Right.
structure. And it was, I believe, 150 square foot structure that was allowed within 15 feet for the type of purposes for your boat cushions and your boat ski gear, tubes, or whatever,
and that's, the only thing I can say is we had a committee that helped work on our shoreland ordinance, and I think we're trying to make sure we're improving the quality of our lakes, and a lot of what we followed were what was in the sort of new Minnesota proposed standards. And I think, the last shoreland standards were done in 70 something. It was before lakes they weren't all built up around them like they are now. And so I think, sort of what used to be allowed, they determined was really actually bad practice, and it's actually harmed a lot of the lakes. And so I think what's been put in place is a prudent ordinance that's trying to, help maintain the quality of the lakes, or certainly not degrade it further.
If you look at the lake quality of both, more so, and I'm a little bit, because I live on Pleasant Lake, but Pleasant Lake and Grand Lake have increased visibility just dramatically over the last 5 to 8 years. I mean, dramatically, so we're doing something right.
What is the size of this structure?
10 by 12.
Yeah, 120 square feet, I believe.
You would certainly think that 120 square feet could be easily mitigated with rain barrels, a small rain garden, and it looks like he's willing to do that. I don't see that this would be a major impact on the lake.
Okay, so when we grant it for him, then the issue is, then why can't every single person, and if every person around the lake has it, I mean, it is totally why we had an ordinance that says no structures within that 50 feet. And I realize there are structures that exist, they were there, but we're trying to not replicate what's been done that I think has been, there's data out there that shows that that's bad for the lake. And I guess I would say, on what grounds would you grant this and deny somebody else? Then you might as well just frankly change the ordinance, and I think that's not in the best interest of the lake. And he
My
does
view
have
of-
room to move it back. So, I mean, I made a motion to, deny the request, and that's where I'm at.
Anything else? on that?
I just thought that if someone's willing to mitigate that square footage of water, and if anyone came to do the same thing, the same requirement would be, you show that you prove that you can mitigate that water so that it does not affect the lake, then no harm, no foul.
I agree with what Jeff said, and I don't think the intent of a variance process is to actually look at, is there a hardship? And I don't think because somebody wants something for convenience is actually a hardship. I mean, it's intended for when you have, other challenging issues with the piece of property that make it really difficult, and you want somebody to be able to use it. I don't think he's being denied a fair use of it. because he does have room to put it back. And again, I don't think the convenience factor is relevant in granting a variance.
Yeah, I think, again, Rick, if your argument is that we should allow these, then I think the only route to do that is to change the ordinance. I think as the ordinance stands, the question is, do we grant him a variance from that ordinance? And in order to grant a variance from the ordinance, he has to show some level of hardship. So I don't think convenience is an argument that it's a hardship, and nothing else has been presented, so I think we have to live with the ordinance for now, and if, the ordinance gets changed in the future to allow something like what you're allowing, I think that's for down the road, so.
I would say we should look at that ordinance. It seems a little extreme to me.
Yeah. So we had a motion, and if there wasn't a second, or did you start the
I'll
second?
second it.
Okay, motion been made second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, the same?
Nay.
Hey,
Motion passes 3-2 with Rick and Dwayne opposing.
I would like to make a comment. I think what Rick said, we should look at this because I am sure this was first of probably many that will be coming, that there's a way that can probably be worked around on these small little storage sheds that people would like to put out there for their fishing gear or something like that. It's just, like this is one here, he might come back, we could change the orders, he can come back, he can probably get his building there. So maybe take a look at it in the future here.
Just so the council knows, when we did do the ordinance, we had a lot of support from lake owners that our intent is to improve the quality of our lakes, and we've done that. And my personal opinion is we've taken a step backwards. That's not good for the voters who voted you up in those seats.
I just think the inconvenience of having to walk an extra 50 feet to store your equipment is a small price to pay for the positive impact it can have on the lake, so.
I mean, people are proud of the quality of our lakes. Ask them, they are.
Okay, next item, Bill, is appoint officers. Yeah.
If you want, I can
Rita,
speak
go
to
ahead.
that for you. The planning commission recommends that Bill Becker be appointed the chair and Tony Honer as the vice chair, just as an FYI. Tony wished to step down and just be a member. We need to thank her for years of leadership.
Absolutely.
I make a motion to accept.
second it.
Been made second to accept the planning commission officer appointments. Any further discussion? Not, all in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, the same, motion passes. Thank you, Bill, good job. Old business, request for action, final budget amendments.
As I pointed out, we always have, seems like, even though the December 17th meeting, I gave you a ton of budget amendments, we still had a few extra, and which brings up the question, and maybe the finance committee should probably talk about cutting off any major expenditures after 11/30 of any year, because it really, shoving this all in to get it in within a couple of days before, because it's this last meeting of the year, it's plain crazy, and it's maybe not good sense. We're rushing. I don't like doing things rushed. So what we have here is just the last, few remaining things as a request for council action. Budget amendment, building permits. What they actually came in at, we budgeted 20,000 and they actually came in at 15,062. Well, there's actually another account that had, that brings it up to the 20,000. And if you know how we get paid for the building and permits we pay for them out on the outside. We don't, we pay like 63% of whatever the building fee is. There's different rates. So we just thought, a difference of 4,900, probably we should, get that one in as being amended. Penalties and interest in the, the penalties and interest in the water fund was actually $3,934 than what we had anticipated. So that should probably be looked at. There was we thought we were gonna get a grant. Oh, the Fund 221, which is the Grand Lake Association, their Lake Improvement District. They got a grant for $1,000 and we didn't have that in the budget. Expenditure code, again, that building inspector fee actually came in higher than what we expected by $1,667. Employee wages in the fire department, we budgeted $29,000 and actually spent $34,000. Transfer the water bond payment, and I don't know why the beginning budget was at 0, but we already know what that water bond payment's gonna be. So, we just need to correct that beginning budget. That's what these are.
Is that water bond payment for the refunding of Pleasant Lake Water Tower?
No, that would be for this tower over here.
And the second item, reimbursement of operations?
101, 4100, we obviously got, $2,900. And, you know, that's one of those things that, not any 2 years are gonna be the same. You know, we may get something more on, reimbursement for operations, that's like labor to do different things. And so, you really can't set, you know, an exact amount, because it changes.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, on that reimbursement operations to fellow council members, a prime example, I think, in a situation like that, when we have League of Minnesota Cities payments that come in, and then after the year end, then we would get a dividend back to the city for.
That is one, yeah.
And so those are the type of revenues that come in that you don't know until the performance of how the city does in a typical year, and then it's always backlogged. They use an average of about 5 years or something like that. So those are prime examples, and we'll never be able to hit it right on, and this is pretty much the standard every year. Rena makes a good point. If we could curtail that a little earlier in the season, it would make it a lot less challenging at the end. But for us to modify it in January, it's not the end of the world. So I make a motion to accept the recommendations presented to us by administrator to adjust the year-end budget requests.
I'll second that.
Motion been made and second to approve the final budget amendments. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same. Motion passes. Thank you, Rena. The next item is the water conservation, and I'm gonna put that aside, take that later, because I have a feeling that might require a considerable amount of time and discussion. So let's take care of the other items that we can first. New business, annual appointments, committee assignments, under tab 7.
Under annual appointments, you have engineering firm SEH, official newspaper Cold Spring Record, official depositories Granite Community Bank, Plaza Park Bank, Morgan Stanley, Smith Barney, Bremer Bank, and 4M Fund. Number 4 is acting mayor, and that is one you need to appoint tonight. Accountant, auditor accountant is KDV, attorney Rinky Noonan. The weed inspectors, Mayor Jeff Hagan, assistant weed inspectors Nick Walbillig. The county agricultural inspector is Bob Dunning. Process server is Stearns County Sheriff's Department, so.
Rena, is the acting mayor, is that somebody that I appoint, or that has to be a
This
council
comes
motion? Or
Comes from a motion from the
motion of the
council.
Okay. I would make the motion that Sue be the acting mayor in my absence.
I'll second that.
Motion been made and second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Pose, same.
Nay.
Motion passes. I assume Sue will abstain, so we'll go with a 3-1. I guess that would be appropriate, okay.
Do we, and then did
Okay.
that motion include the rest of them or?
No, that was just
Okay.
this
Okay.
one.
So I would make a motion to approve the rest of them as presented.
I'll second that motion.
Discussion?
Okay.
Well,
Well,
and
let-
Can we just back up, Mr. Mayor? And so what are we doing is that was the motion that was made for the acting mayor and now we're going on to full slate? Is that what I hear?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Could I clarify something on the personnel committee? A lot of times,
We're
the-
not,
No, we're just doing this.
we're not on that one yet.
yeah.
Well, this is just
This
the,
1 through 10.
Annual
his
appointments.
annual appointments. We'll get that next.
oh, the acting mayor
Yeah.
one, okay,
Yep.
excuse me.
So motion been made and second to approve the annual appointments. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion passes. Okay, the next item is the committee assignments. Go ahead, Rick, with your point.
Just point of clarification here, the personnel committee is generally posted a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times it's posted as a HR meeting. Do we have two separate committees? Is
No,
there
they're actually the
HR?
same thing, and I guess some of us call it
Right.
one thing, some
Right.
call it.
And that's where I think we would just get some clarification, either
Yeah.
it's an HR committee or personnel committee.
You know
Doesn't
what?
make
Yeah,
a
we
difference
should
to
do
me
that.
either way, but I think if we just have one name for that committee,
Good idea, yeah.
What's the wish of the council?
the
as far
wishes,
as
everybody?
terminology?
I would vote towards HR committee. I think
HR?
that-
Yeah, and I think we use that often. I mean,
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay,
So
even
we'll
on
just
the
change
notes
this.
from a meeting, we say human resources, so
yeah.
that's fine.
okay.
All right,
Any other discussions on committee appointments?
Yeah, I would, I had requested to be on the HR committee, and I would like to possibly have some discussion on that.
Okay.
Is there, quick technicality, does it take, is it just two, or because it's a special meeting that's called anyway, what's the difference if we have several members? And it certainly doesn't even need to be council members or something like that, to serve in that capacity? Are we,
Well, I think there's always been a concern of having a quorum of the council
Right.
on these meetings. You know, that issue of ad hoc versus standing committee was an issue that I looked into in the last week, and I find no black and white. I personally, I would like to see it, all these committees is limited to two council members for that concern that we are having a quorum at these meetings, where the intent of these committees are to be recommending bodies and not decision makers. Decision making is done at the council level, so I personally like to see it stay at two.
I think what I hear Dwayne saying is if we could find someone from the public that would be willing to serve on these committees, because I remember hearing you, Sue, many a time saying, it's really strange to have
Yes,
just
it
two
is.
people at a meeting. You know, I make a motion, I second, and then you both approve. It's kind of a strange situation. So to have more input, I don't know if we'd have more people interested in helping serve on committees, but it would be beneficial to us as a city to get more input on these things.
No, I guess the only question I'd have is because really these are considered standing committees, and I think as we were elected, and generally, I think you would find that only your elected members are on these unless we establish for some reason, you know, an ad hoc task force for some, you know, particular issue or purpose. So, you know, I guess from that standpoint, my feeling would be to keep the committees as is, but if there's an issue that seems to warrant, you know, adding people, I think by all means, we should look at that.
It's like the
You know, sort of
parking-
more projects or issue specific than
Yeah.
just being on a standing
Like
committee.
the Park and Rec, I mean, and Rickory Trail Construction Board, I served on those and I was not a member
Sure.
at that point, so.
if I could make a quick comment, the Finance Committee would be the same thing, Public Works, and I think when I'm envisioning this, I don't know if the word is deputizing, but to build consensus and to have governance styles, if there's two committee members that are on the council and we don't have the cumbersome nature of the open meeting law where you need to go and have, when 3 council members, that's superb thought process, but to be able to show more transparency, I think that's probably, public committee meetings generally are not on the same night as the council meetings, where finance many times are, and so the visibility, and I've seen how interaction, finance committee, not too many years ago, when we had 6 members, council members and a mayor, we had more finance committee members, and it worked more fluently than 2. It's a little cumbersome, but it's, maybe in the long term when we have workshops, that would be probably a great time rather than tonight, but a
Right.
workshop to try to look at the pluses and minuses or
Right.
pros and cons of that.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rick.
would you recognize Tootie or no?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sweet.
I just want you to tell us who is on each of these committees, because you're all talking
Yeah.
about whether somebody else should be.
Is
on
that,
Yeah, it's after the
is
fact.
that not in the packet?
it. No,
It's
Yeah,
not.
it should be.
It's,
and I would be the only one that would have it.
Right.
Yeah.
And Rena said it's not
After
in
the
there,
fact,
so
It should be in there, yeah.
it should be in there?
Yeah.
She says it's in there.
Yeah,
Well, we still, none of these people have the pack.
Okay.
right.
that's quite lengthy. I'll rattle them off then, I guess. Public Works, Don Simon, Jeff Hagan. Human Resources, Jeff Hagan, Sue Palmer. Park and Rec, Scott Stenseth, Lori Anderson, Paul Worth, Dwayne Willenbring.
As
What?
liaison.
As liaison. Planning Commission, Susan Palmer as liaison, Tony Honer, Jerry Tipple, Dale Borgman, Bill Becker as chair. Negotiating Team, Don Simon, Rick Tallman. Finance Committee, Rick Tallman, Sue Palmer. EDA, Vern Salzo, Ed Carls, Dwayne Willenbring, Don Simon, Jacob Ryder. Tri-City Cable, Roger Schmidt, Brian Mikulski. Rocori Trail, Dwayne Willenbring, and John Peck.
Thank you. Can that be posted, or is it probably posted?
After it takes council action before it's official.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, sorry, that's your job.
I'll make a motion to approve
I wanted
committees.
discussion on the HR committee.
Okay.
What I wanted to discuss was, in talking with taxpayers, I don't think we could afford another year like we've just had with the HR committee. And that being the processes that took place. Let's see, we go back to Kevin Brown being dismissed. Kevin Brown was doing a fantastic job. Everybody I talked to said Kevin Brown was doing a phenomenal job with the plowing. He was updating our equipment. He got the toolcat replaced with a bobcat that was more functionable for the city. He replaced trucks, tools, you name it. He was doing a fantastic job. He was given the option to resign or be fired. Those are his words, not mine. And then that job was never posted, and there was an immediate request to hire his replacement from the mayor. And that ruffled a lot, not just me, comes from the citizens. They were not okay with the job not being posted, and then there was comments that thorough research was done on Kevin's replacement. Don had put feedback in there that we don't want to have to be replacing somebody within 6 months. Well, he was gone after 5 months. And let's see, that hiring created a pay inequity that cost the taxpayers another $40-some thousand. I don't have the exact figure, over $40,000 in pay raises. Let's see, where did we go after that? I'm just kind of losing track. When the statement was made, there was a thorough research done on Roger. I did a very simple research, but it's very thorough. It's called a Google search. I entered his name in a Google search, and huge red flags came up all over. Just a few months earlier, the St. Cloud Times had did a report, or a story, that had a advisor, or I'm trying to remember what the name of, a consultant came into the city of Foley, and that resulted in order for the city to move on Roger needed to leave the city. So within months, we hired him on here. He had just left that city. He had several other jobs before that. So in all of this, then after he left, the HR committee relinquished their duties and gave them to Dwayne and Don to find Nick. So what I'm getting at here, we need a new HR committee. I don't think we could, in the taxpayers that have sent me up here to represent them, they are telling me we can't afford another year like that.
You know, I'll just say, Rick, there's a lot of things that I don't think exactly the way you present it. And the fact is, we have people who were grossly underpaid. They weren't even on a salary scale, and it was difficult to hire at whoever it was coming in. So I don't anticipate that, because we did some steps to rectify how far behind we had gotten in the city of Rockville.
With that statement, let me just make a point of clarification there. You're saying we couldn't hire anybody. We had Kevin Brown in place at $18.67 an hour. He was requesting several times, he was stating that the duties of the position did not equal the pay he was getting. He was not offered any raise. He was offered to resign or be fired. And the comment was made that he had no, was it respect for the budget, or he had no sense of the budget? But yet, I watched him from the audience come and ask every improvement that he wanted done. He asked for council approval. He didn't spend any money that was not approved by the council.
Mr. Mayor, make a comment? Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Dwayne.
The Personnel Committee is a recommending body, as is the Finance Committee, Public Works Committee, and all others. And so therefore, as a city council member, I have the one bite at the apple when those decisions are made, and when the Finance Committee, Public Works Committee, or Personnel, or in our case, Human Resources makes that. I have always had a philosophy, believe but verify. And so the process of the Human Resources, I agree with you, it was a horrendous task of trying to keep employees, but that's behind us right now. And so Council Member Tallman, I'm looking forward to working with you, but when we have the Personnel Committee and we need to have a modification in that, fine, it's always open to the public, we can always have input. I think that's the important thing that we have to remember. So as a recommending body, and so what we're trying to achieve tonight, and I heard you, the signal loud and clear that we need to have, and this is not orchestrated, but quite frankly, civility and all of that, looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to working with you in that regards. But the motion that's on the floor, and I'm ready to vote when Mr. Mayor, when you move forward. I believe there was a motion and a second on the floor, is there not? Correct?
I don't think there's a second.
Okay. Well, is there a motion to accept the, if there is not a motion to accept the Public Works, the 2015 committee as presented, I'll make a motion. And the only change that I see at this stage of the game is the change from Personnel Committee to Human Resources. Other than that, I believe this was the recommendation that was brought forward by staff. I believe that is where, and we all had input. So we had input, and if you did your job, all of us collectively. So I'm looking forward to moving forward, so I'll make that in a motion.
Well, I think Sue did make the motion, correct?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, you
make a
did, I'm
motion,
sorry.
So if you want to second.
I didn't realize there was a
No,
motion.
yeah.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Motion's been made and second to approve the 2015 committee appointments. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, next item is Don Simon's contract approval, resolution 2015-2. I'll make a motion. Don's been doing this for a long time and done an excellent job, and I recommend I'll make a motion and we approve it again for 2015.
I'll second it.
Motion been made and second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same, motion passes. Done. Abstained. Committee reports, I don't have anything outside of the water conservation rate, we'll discuss later. Rocori Trail, any updates there, Dwayne, or?
RTCB had a meeting, it rotates, I got to have the privilege of being the chair again one more year, and very little other action items, looking forward to a meeting very shortly with the BSFN, and then we will have lots of stuff, so nothing else to report. And Rena is now our administrator, what's the fancy word?
Secretary, treasurer, board.
Secretary, yeah, usually follows whoever the chair, and it rotates between the three communities.
Okay.
And thanks for stepping up to that, Rena.
Yep.
Next item, human resource, we have anything else, Sue, or?
We do, we have a couple things. We do need a change to the health insurance policy, and we did look at this at the last meeting, but because we've now hired somebody, and we just need some additional language just to be really clear about the policy. So I'll read the policy and then I'll point out the part that we're adding. The policy says health differential pay will be provided to those full-time employees choosing not to enroll in the group health insurance policy. Employees shall receive 80% of the monthly single premium rate in cash. This health differential pay shall be paid as part of the employee's regular paycheck and will be taxable. And here's the addition, will be taxable income unless elected into a non-taxable, parentheses, HSA or similar plan. So we're adding the part about it's taxable income unless it goes into an HSA or that type of plan.
Okay.
So I'll make that motion to accept that change.
I'll second that.
Motion been made and second, any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same, motion passes.
All right, and then we had one other item, and that was, there was a request to look at whether we would grant 5 days more vacation at 3 years of service for regular part-time employees. And Rena, maybe you could just remind me how much they get, because they don't have it.
They just get 5 days.
5
Now-
days.
Now they would be getting 10 days.
So after 3 years, and it's not actually just vacation, it's your
Your PTO.
PTO. So after 3 years of service, moving it up to 2 weeks, essentially,
Okay. For part-time.
for part-time.
Is that in our packet someplace, or was that circulated?
Well, we just brought that up tonight at the HR meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so do we have current policy on that right now, or we probably don't, otherwise we
Currently,
wouldn't be
we
acting
do have a
on it?
5-day.
We just have 5
minimum.
days. We're looking at requesting to change that policy.
Okay, from
For
5,
regular
and I wasn't
part-time.
focusing, I'm sorry.
You have to change it from 5 days to granting 5 more days
5
at
additional
3
days.
years of service.
And
After
what
3
triggers it
years.
is not when they started employment, but when they become a full-time employee, or is this?
No.
only-
No. After they've completed
Even as
3
a
years
part-time?
as a part-time.
Okay.
This is a regular part-time person, not your temporary
Right.
seasonal people.
Yeah, regular.
Because the scope of work that we have, that individual is basically a part-time,
Permanent part-time.
right, permanent,
Right,
got it.
permanent
That
part-time,
makes it different,
yep.
okay. Yep.
This would be referring to Mandy.
Yeah.
Basically,
It's
yeah.
the only part-time.
Right.
That position, right?
Yeah, she's
So-
been very good at it, so.
So I would make that as a motion.
Second,
Motion been made and second to approve the PTO to 10 days from 5 days after 3 years of employment. All in favor, say aye.
aye.
Opposed, same.
I would like to abstain because I don't have enough research to really make an informed decision on that.
Okay, motion passes 4 and one abstain.
That's it.
Okay, thanks, Sue. Administrators correspondence, Rena, do you
I
have
have
any?
nothing.
Okay. Do we have anybody that wants to speak at open forum? Otherwise, I think the water conservation rate discussion might go to some length.
George Becker, residential pay in Rockville at 244 West Broadway Street. Just wondering how you get your name back on as a business in the Rockville City, the city roster. I used to be on there. I had a link that went direct to my ad that was on the internet, and all of a sudden I was deleted
You're speaking of the city website?
on the city website.
Okay.
And all of a sudden we were deleted, and I have no idea why or what.
I don't know either, it's the first I knew of it, so.
Was that a business association
No, we had a
project?
list of
or-
city businesses, and then apparently we had a link. I didn't know that we had a link.
I had a personal link that came off of that. That came off the city website.
Oh, you did?
That showed the Granite Escapade ad. But if I
I'll
punch
check
up-
into it, George, I didn't know what
But
happened,
if I
so.
punch up on the city of Rockville right now under businesses, under restaurants, and I got eliminated.
Well, you shouldn't have.
I'm just wondering
But-
why we got eliminated.
I'll check into it for you.
If I may, I know when city staff had sent out like a little questionnaire of businesses, and being that I have apartments, I was sent this questionnaire, and you would fill out the information, and then that is, I believe, what they use to put on the city website. And that's maybe what he had, and somehow it got eliminated, so I think it'd probably be easy enough to get back on there.
I would think so, yeah.
Let staff take care of that, that's no city.
Okay. Yep, Paul.
Paul Worth, County Road 6, City of Rockville. In regard to the shoreline ordinance, I was on the shoreline ordinance committee. That committee lasted for almost 3 years. We met often and we met extensively. Our meetings, it was nothing to have 3 to 5 hour meetings each time we met. We went to a number of workshops. We were fortunate enough to have speakers from the DNR, the county, state of Minnesota, and a lot of these people are now retired, so we were very well rewarded by having these people there that worked 30 plus years, going close to retirement, very versed in what they were doing. I got a mountain of papers at home that we studied on this committee to make sure it was correct, that we were doing the right thing. The majority of lakes in Minnesota are now under ordinance shoreline committee, ordinances. It would be a mistake to go backward on this, and you are right, Sue, by saying this. And I think that the planning commission was right on passing this as non-approval. The thing that I questioned was this portable station to be on a permanent slab? Because you can remove the building, but you aren't removing the impervious surface.
Oh, the slab. That's true.
It's still there. So, and Jeff pointed out very well why these are in need and why we shouldn't change them. You can reopen this, but I doubt it's gonna change. I know the county has changed theirs since, and we did have county members come to our committee, give presentations, a number of them. A number from the DNR and the state also. We all worked together very hard on this. The only way I could attend was to give up my earned vacation to attend these meetings, and I gave up a lot of vacation in almost 3 years' time on this. And I'm sure other members on the committee did the same. This was not a haphazard decision. This took a lot of study. We had people from other associations come in from around the state, speak to us and how well it's working in their communities, why they're doing it, the value of it. It is the way of the future. If we're going to keep our waters clean and safe, that's the way to do it. And people often forget that it not only includes the waters of the lakes, it includes the water that's in your well. Because everything has to filter down somehow. And the well testing in this area, improvements have gone up since these been ordinances that have been in effect. Well, the lakes have cleared up so much, and that's been very clear to all of us that have done the studies and are still working on lake projects, that everything that was in the lake has now filtered out because there's been very little added to it since the placement of the ordinances. So we're going in the right direction. It'd be a mistake to move backwards. I had very high interest in this. I volunteered to join the committee. I gave up a lot to do it, and I'm sure the other members did also. They were very passionate about our environment. That's why we have it. We shouldn't be thinking of setting up a precedence for people in the future, and that's what you're gonna do here. Don, I think you said it. Other people are gonna come in, or maybe it was you, Sue, gonna come in and ask for these same types of things. If you approve one, you're just gonna open the door for them, and we're gonna start moving backwards. The reason that some of these buildings still exist on these lakes is that's acceptable in the ordinance, but as they fail, they were not to be replaced in the same footprint. They would move back in regards to the ordinance. That's the way it should be. Everything that we studied on this proves it. We should stay with what we approved. It's right for our community. Thank you.
Oh, I would just have one question, if I may.
Go ahead.
If all this research was done, has that been given to the city so that, I'm sure that there was plenty done, and I know that's great, and there's mountains of paperwork and everything that's been done, but where did that go? To the cities? Did it stay at the county? Did it stay at the state? Where did it get shared so that each of the communities know of all of the work that was done?
Well, a lot of it was done through the associations, which affected the immediate members and property owners. I'm sure there's records here in file, if there's enough space for it. I mean, there was an incredible amount of paper on this. I don't fully understand your question. You want to know where the information is, where it lies?
Well, if all of this research was done and a lot of decisions were made, how is it being utilized? Was it a small group that decided this? When the associations you're talking about, are these lake associations?
Yes, that's where the information has been shared, all the way through the process.
Okay.
I mean, folks agreed to this. This is what they wanted. They knew it would take some effort to do it.
But there was also planning commission members, I believe, on it. City staff was involved with it, so it was broader than just that. And then bringing in, as Paul mentioned, I guess experts from the DNR and other sources as needed. So
Everything that we used came from other associations, other lakes, other regulated areas that already have been proven to work, which we studied extensively and decided that would work for our community. It's the right direction to go.
Yeah, well, but definitely, I mean, it was basically an ad hoc committee established by the council and planning commission for the sole purpose of developing a shoreline ordinance, and once your work was done, it was put into writing it in the form of a shoreline ordinance, where I'm sure we had a public hearing, and the city passed it as the shoreline.
We did, and you're right, it was a
Ordinance.
separate committee because it was so big. It was so important. 3-year committee. We met weekly, if not several times a week, for almost 3 years. That's a lot of time. A lot of time. So, reopen it, do what you think, but I doubt it's gonna move anywhere. After all that work, we have enough to say, or enough proof to say that this does work. And to reverse it would be, could deserve create a real tragedy. It could open up something that you don't want to be handling, to try to change it again. Because you're just setting a precedence. It's not the way to approach it.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, then we'll go back to the ordinance that we're working on for establishing a water conservation rate. I think this is probably our third or maybe fourth council meeting on this. I think there's like 5 proposals out there. You know, our job here, my job is to try to manage a discussion on this, to try to make progress and hopefully reach a conclusion. I know that I hadn't spent a lot of time on this until recently, and I did that because of questions that came up when looking at the proposals versus what was being told and in quick reads from literature put out by Minnesota Rural Water, DNR, League of Minnesota Cities. So I put together a proposal within the last 24 hours. So I'm probably overly optimistic to think we'll actually prove something tonight, but I just wanted to go through some of the background and reasons why I developed the proposal I did. And so I'm thinking that maybe the council can discuss those issues that I brought up, and maybe if we can reach some agreement on some of these, maybe disagreements on some, maybe that'll enable us to whittle down the 5 options to 1 or maybe 2 at the most, and hopefully within those options we can come to a conclusion. So I'll just read what I put out, and this was sent out to the council today. The reasons I have for my proposal, taken from literature from entities such as Minnesota Rural Water, DNR, League of Minnesota Cities, recommendations that have been made from fellow councilors throughout this 3 or 4 month working of this tiered water rate, historically and recently from Rockville and from surveys from majority of similar cities. I see the purpose of the statute is to promote conservation of water, and the intent is to promote conservation at all levels affecting all residents. 2, there's historical and current support and justification for fixed water fees that cover capital expenses, fixed and partially fixed operating expenses, i.e. operations, maintenance, and replacements is terminology used for that. This base fixed water fee is intended to be adjusted as those expenses that are covered by this fixed fee change over time. Number 3, there's historic and current support and justification that water should be provided / sold at a cost relative to its cost of production, that it should not be provided for free, but should be sold near or at its marginal cost of production. For the aforementioned entities support incentivizing all residents to conserve water regardless of where they fall on the usage chart. We have 24% of our users that fall in the category of 0 to 4,000 gallons per cycle, and the proposal has been made to provide water at no charge for them other than the base water fee. So my feeling is providing free water for 24% of our users will not result in their conserving any water, but most likely will cause them to use all of the allotted 4,000 gallons because they will view it as being, quote, free. This will have the opposite impact that the statute intends for this group of people. Number 5, Minnesota Rural Water recommends that the tier increases be at least 25% on the low end and at least 50% on the upper end. This is logical because those at the low end have lower abilities to conserve water, and those at the higher end have the largest abilities to conserve water. Each user has basic needs for water, and as the amount used increases, it is my opinion that the additional water used becomes more discretionary. 6, it is my opinion that the tiered structure should be designed to provide as much incentive as possible for users to try and move to a lower tier and or to avoid moving to a higher tier. Financial incentives are the best way to do that, and the statute and the above entities imply the same. 7, Minnesota Rural Water recommends 3, possibly 4 tiers be used. They recommended that the blocks or tiers be approximately 5,000 to 10,000 gallon increments, but given that their average user is 40,000 gallons, it is my opinion that possibly 4,000 gallon tiers are more appropriate given that Rockville's average user is about 8,500 gallons per cycle. I also took into consideration the strata of users in each tier block that you see attached here. The audience doesn't have that, but Judy broke it out into 4 tiers, 24% from 0 to 4,000. I think 4,000 to 4,000 to 8,000 is 40% of the residents. From 8,000 to 14,000 gallons, 28%, and 8% of the residents using 14,000 gallons or more per cycle. Number 8, I use $20 as a base fee. As the most recent recommendation from council members has been to go to $20 per unit per cycle base fee, up from the current $19.08 per cycle base fee. This is a relatively minor increase, and it allows for some funds to help build up the 6-month operating reserve that Dwayne Willenbring recommended at the last council meeting. His recommendation was that enterprise funds like this, and actually a lot of private financial managers recommended people having a operating reserve or savings reserve to cover 6 months of their operating costs. In this city's budget for this enterprise fund for 2015 is $120,000, so we're talking about something in the $60,000 range at 6 months. Number 9, if we hope this required conservation program is successful, we should build in some sort of reduction in projected water use. Our budget for 2015 is approximately $120,000, so if 10 to 20% reduction is a reasonable goal, and if we use 15% as an average, we would receive roughly 18,000 less than budgeted. I think the 18,000 is referring to my proposal, which I think projects revenue in 160,000. I think, Rena?
Yes.
I think that's where the 18,000. Therefore, we need to approve a rate structure that allows for the hoped for / expected water savings, i.e. revenue reduction. 10, Dwayne made a very good recommendation that this enterprise fund carry the recommended 6-month operating reserve, which using 2015 budget 120,000 would be 60,000. If you use my approximate 160,000 revenue projections worked up by Judy using my tiers, reduce that by 15% for water savings, the revenue result would be approximately 136,000. And if you subtract 120,000, this allows us to put roughly 16,000 into the operating reserve that has a goal of 60,000. At 5% water savings, this allows 152,000 less than 120,000, or 32,000 to go into the operating reserve. At 10% water savings, this allows 144,000 less than 120,000, or 24,000 going in the operating reserves. I would just also note that because we're raised the base fee from $19.08 to $20, there's a 92 cents gain, 6 cycles per year, $5.52 a year. I use 300 users. I see here we got 388, so we got a little bit more. We're talking an immaterial, less than $2,000 would be additional be generated there, which could go to that operating reserves. I think it would be imprudent for the council to propose a structure that would result in less expected revenue than what our budget expenses are for 2015. Some expected water savings should be built into the structure. So I guess my goal here is, by going through this part of it and looking at the 5 proposals we got, are there some that we should take out of consideration because they don't appear to meet some of the objectives and issues that I raise here? Or maybe before we go there, does anybody have strong disagreement with some of the issues I brought up here? Maybe we should go get over that hurdle first. Go ahead, Rick.
Sure. What I had proposed, I know it has Dwayne and Rick's proposal, but really Dwayne has his own proposal. We started working together, and then he kind of came up with a little bit different. So anyway, with that said, the first proposal that I had put together was based on the water rate study done last year, showing that our cost to produce 1,000 gallons was $4.96. So the reason I came up with $5 per 1,000, it was just a round figure to make it very easy to determine if somebody used 2,000 gallons, it was gonna cost them $10. Nice and simple. The reason to eliminate the actual base fee without any usage included is that's where the unfairness comes in. When you're wanting to charge the base fee for nothing, then when people start using less, they're paying more for each 1,000 gallons. It's simple math, it's not rocket science, okay? So when, and Jeff, in your number 3 point, you said water should be provided / sold at a cost relative to its cost of production. That's exactly what my proposal does. I'm trying to sell it at our cost to produce it. The water rates that we had in place this year actually produced more revenue than was projected. The projected income, I believe, if I got my figures right, was $117,000. And at the August finance meeting that I was at, revenue had actually exceeded $120,000. That was for last, well, not 2014, it would have been 2013. Okay? Because we were talking about that one.
At the budget meeting, right? Is that what you're
The
talking
budget
about?
meeting, yes. So, in reviewing your proposal here, Jeff, when you're saying water should be provided / sold at the cost relative to its production, your proposal has somebody using more than 14,000 gallons paying $7.90, someone using between 8,000 and 14,000 paying $5.25. At what point does it cost us more to produce 1,000 gallons? When they're using more than 14,000? Each 1,000 gallons costs the same to produce.
That's not the point. I mean, the conservation rates are sort of mandating though that we tier it. So I hear what you're saying, Rick, but
They're not mandating tiered. Like I had pointed out, Waite Park has one rate,
well, that doesn't mean they're
$5.47 per
doing it
1,000.
right.
Pardon?
That doesn't mean they're doing it right. When Rena contacted them, they weren't even aware of the
Statute, this
statute.
requirement.
So I don't think we can use that as saying, hold that up and saying they're doing absolutely what should be done.
But the law does say you can charge the flat rate. It's right in the law.
You can do that, but you also have to file that 21-page document to get
More
that.
than that, 36.
But it's not that huge a deal to do this report. Are you saying that staff can't do this report? I was reviewing that report and it's not. It's all figures that we should have right here.
Well, Rick, number 1, you don't believe in encouraging people to conserve water?
Absolutely, absolutely. But I don't feel that they should be penalized when they do that. Charging a flat fee with nothing included, you penalize them for using less. You're gonna charge them more for each 1,000 gallons. Here,
I
right
don't-
in your figures, right here.
I
In
don't-
my proposal, if somebody uses 1,000 gallons,
Yeah.
they will pay $20. Okay.
I know you have one way of looking at, we did, can we just disagree to allocate the base fee over the low volume of gallons? And that's what your argument is, because you prorate the base fee over those gallons, so make it look like people on the low end pay more. But the issue is, we have to cover our fixed operating expenses, and we're not unlike the majority of cities, of water utilities, electric utilities. Everybody that I know pays a base rate, and it's not unusual to be charged in electrical utilities. If you end up using electricity in the middle of summer where there's high demand, you'll pay a higher rate for that. So it is not unusual for utilities to charge a higher rate for higher amount of usage.
And they're generally in it to make money. We're in it to break even. And we're trying to sell our, you just said it in your proposal. We want to sell it at a cost of what it costs us to produce, so we break even. The reason, or the way you achieve getting your operating costs in my plan is that you require a monthly minimum. Even if they use 1,000 gallons, they have to pay for 4,000 because we have to get that minimum operate the system and get your operating costs. And I understand what you're saying, well, maybe they'll use more. Well, if they're using 1,000 gallons a month, I highly doubt that they're gonna all of a sudden start using 4,000 gallons a month.
Well, my proposal is, goal is to not only break even, but is also to try to encourage people to conserve water. And it's very consistent with what these other entities that have been in this business, specializes in this business much more than we do, and they have input from a large number of cities. Why do you not see the benefit in using what work is already researched and recommendations are already being made by these entities? Why do you feel you're smarter or your method is better than this huge number that go into this?
Because as I stated, this is not rocket science. The water fund is a private enterprise, okay? It's not the city, it's a private enterprise. That enterprise is selling one product. We can determine our cost for each 1,000 gallons. It's not very hard to do at all. We know how many 1,000 gallons we pumped. We know how much it costs us to operate it. You divide the two, now you find out how much each 1,000 gallons costs. Your goal is to cover operating costs. We're not trying to make a profit. It's simple. It's not difficult at all. You're trying to make it difficult, and then in your plan, you're trying to show that 0 to 4,000 gallons only costs $2.75, and then over 14,000 gallons, it costs $7.90 for each 1,000 gallons.
Mm-hmm.
Each 1,000 gallons costs the same.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead, Dwayne.
on the onset of your comments, you asked for if we have some commonality here. And so I'll be so brash as to say if we can just set the mayor's proposal off to the side, which is the more expensive one, and the Tallman one off to the side. And if we'd really focus on the other three, and I bring that forward because we did have, when I talk about we, Sue and Rena and myself, council member and administrator, Rena and myself, and we had an agreement amongst the three of us that I thought was really, really close. Sue followed up. So if you look at the commonality between the two of them, and we have to remember Judy, who generates all of this and did an enormous amount of work in a short amount of time, but we're only using a snapshot for 1 year. That's the heartbreak for me, is that if we have, looking back, have we had less unaccounted water or something like that? But if we could just, for a moment, and I think if the rest of you share with me, I highlighted it, the approximate revenue on the Willenbring proposal is $113,255. And Sue obviously will speak for herself, and that's $126, so we're relatively close. The makeup is slightly different in where the breaks would come, and she has several tiers, and I have several tiers. And so in that suggested amount of revenue that we're generating, there's two other equations that does not show on this printout. One of them is the additional water tower rental that we talked about last month, and I believe that was $6,429. So somewhere along the line.
Dwayne, can we just keep this pure to the issues at hand?
It's relevant, though, if we're looking at it from the perspective of this particular year, because we have $6,429 that we are envisioning coming in. And so
That's 10%.
Yep. Can I just, I want to clarify one thing with you. When the mayor was using 120,000, that is on the revenue side, that's the amount that we need to bring in just to meet expenses. The actual budget is 147,000.
Yeah.
There are other revenue pieces like what you just said. That, we're getting other money in from some other things, okay?
So he's already factored those in.
So that's in there, so.
Okay, but
So it's 120 is what I need you to, that's the only.
Does that
thing to
make
talk
sense,
about.
Stu?
we're trying to be civil here, and so that we can continue to have, so we can keep focusing on it. So when we're pleading our case, I think I'm right in it, and if you want to shoot it full of holes when it's your turn, but I thought I had the floor, so I'm going to say this politely. The water tower rental, which I alluded to in this particular case for my equation, how I came up with the 130,000 total. And then the other one was the water that's used for public purpose. The skating ring, fire department, flushing lines, all of those type of things that we are getting some, in theory, revenue from ad valorem tax coming from the general fund going towards the water enterprise fund. So if you take those three together, the projected one, and it's right in front of you, 113,225.82. The water tower rental of 6,429, and then the last one is the projected revenue of that, and I'm only using 10%. We know that we've had a lot more than 10% of water that was unaccounted, that was pumped, that should be a portion of that, a big portion of that is paid by the city general fund in ad valorem tax. You add those three numbers together, $130,426.82. So that's not envisioning that we're going to have any reduction in the conservation, but it is intended. So the process, much like Mr. Tallman has and much like Sue has, and I don't know about yours, Jeff or Mr. Mayor, the 4,000 gallons, the $20, and I think there's a commonality. We all agree $20 is a great number to start off with to accommodate the base fee that we need to have for those fixed rates or fixed dollars. That's the end of the concept of how I came up with this here of the 130,000. Now Sue's, the base is roughly $13,000 more, but the add-ons that I just added would also be relevant in her case, or something like that, if we're doing it. But so my proposal would be to start off, as it's alluding to, from 0 to 4,000 gallons per month would be in that base fee of $20. From the 4,000 to the 1,500 at $5.30 per thousand. And this is a number that Sue, Rena, and I generated when we were sitting together. And then anytime you get beyond the 15,000, that additional would be at a rate of $6.25. So that's where we see the approximately 8% of the total volume of water that would be at a higher rate, but only the bulk of it, the biggest bulk of it would all be at that $5.30. If you recall, last month I had a number of $5.10 to $5.15, but when we sat down and rationalized it, the three of us, we felt that we needed to have a number. So in a one time, the three of us had all agreed that that was the logical one. Obviously, Sue had a slight adjustment here, so that's my reasoning that I believe that Will and Bring proposal is the most logical one at this point, but I may be biased.
Can, Mary?
Go ahead, Sue.
So I know we met and we've talked about different things. I would say, and looking at this, I think that we do need to do something to adjust, not using 4,000, because I don't think I had the percentages of the users that were falling in each of those categories. And I do agree that one of the goals is to try to reduce usage at every level. So I think we should look at 0 to 3,000, 3,001 to 8,000, 8,001, sort of closer to Jeff's tiers, but adjusting them slightly, because I think that first one should only go to 3,000, so that there is some incentive even in the first tier to reduce usage, because frankly, I don't think there is. When I went back and looked at it, if you look at what somebody currently pays for 4,000 gallons, they would be paying under our current structure $32.88, I believe. Or is that the new one? And under the current, if we were just charging them $20, that's like a 40% decrease in what they're paying. And there's, to me, absolutely no incentive to change how much you're using. So I think we should look at tiers of 0 to 3, 3,001 to 8, 8,001 to 14, and then the 14 and over. And we also had conversation, if we had very, very large commercial users, we would have a separate conversation with those users to try to adjust what they're doing. So I guess I would wonder, would we consider For the 0 to 3,000, $20. So you're in that range, you're gonna pay $20. Then in the 3,001 to 8,000, looking at like the 575, and then going up from there on the other tiers. And I recognize, and the reason, if you look at mine, I got to $6 and $7.20, was looking at roughly a 20% increase between those tiers, partly because that's the recommendation that we were seeing from the League of Minnesota Cities and Minnesota Rural Water about what the conservation rate and the DNR about having enough gap between those rates that it actually would incentivize a change.
So Sue, your proposal, 0 to 3,000 is $20, water's free.
Well, it's not free.
No,
Well,
it's included. yeah.
Okay, then my question is, how are you gonna handle the base water fee rate when that cost increases? Are we gonna
We would have
adjust?
to adjust that.
that $20?
And frankly, we'd have to adjust, to me, every tier after that sort of accordingly as well.
So then, I guess, just in theory or in principle, if we can agree that $20 per cycle is what the city needs to charge just to cover its overhead, for lack of a better term, fixed costs, then the first 3,000 gallons that people use, we're effectively not charging anything for it, though it should have a cost, right? I mean, if everybody closed up and we had to charge $20 per cycle to cover all of our expenses, we would be at break even to cover our costs. But then if we give everybody 3,000 gallons, we're effectively not collecting anything for those first 3,000 gallons.
Well, and what you would have to do, so I guess we could have conversation about, is $20 the right amount, or should it be something slightly higher? And I'm open to that, Jeff. And I also think it means those other tiers are going to be significantly higher per 1,000 gallons, because you have to collect it somewhere. So it can't be, and I think that's evident in the proposals when we first looked at some of them, that, and Dwayne, you would agree, some of the first ones we looked at, it didn't generate enough revenue.
That's right.
That's an issue. So I think that's why when you see mine, $6 and $7.20 might seem to be a lot, but you can't generate enough revenue unless you're changing those other tiers to be significantly more.
Okay, so that was my
So you have to pick it up somewhere.
Okay,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
was my first point to cover
So,
that issue.
yeah.
So your first tier from, a first increase for tier 3,001 to 8,000, you're
I actually
proposing-
started out at saying you should be $25 on my own page, so 0 to 325, but that's open for conversation.
Okay,
And then I would go
to
$6, $7.20, and it tiers up from
And then your last tier, 14,000 and above
is I would go to 870, which is slightly more than 20%. So
okay, so though Minnesota Rural Water recommends 25% on the low end and 50% on the high
Yeah,
end.
I'd go
You just
50.
want to go with the 20, okay. I just point out,
yeah,
because I think there's benefit in using.
and that could be changed.
recommendations,
It's
so.
just
But we're, like you say, we are at significant levels.
right.
Mr. Mayor, if I could ask Sue, so I understand this is a change on the fly, for lack of better words, and
It
I'm
is.
not intended to be derogatory with those comments, but the basic 0 to 4 at the $20 that I see on yours, and then the 4,000 to the 15,000 at the $6, and I'm assuming that is only after the 15,000 at the $6 rate, then the gallons over the 15,000 would be going at the 720, correct? It's not.
Well, Dwayne, can I just correct, the Sue is amended, assuming
once you
Sue
think
wants
about
us to
that.
move on to a new, the
Okay, if we're
latest
using
proposal.
the new one, so.
Right.
So we are using the word instead of the gallons over, so just because somebody in the middle of the summer ends up being at $14,000, 14,000 gallons, and whatever rate that you suggest in that, Sue, was
Well, and yeah,
whatever that amount is going to be, but we're not going to take the first gallon after they have the 3,000 used up. They're still going through each one of those 3 sets, and then once they are gallons over the 14,000, that remaining amount would be higher. Okay, and that's the
Yeah.
first 2 months ago, that was the challenge that we had. So we all agree that this is going through each step when they
No,
allocate that
I
used
think
up.
something to raise, and I know the staff checked into this. You know, right now we send out a postcard with, you know, here's your bill.
Yeah.
If we were to try to, and they checked, and we could do this within the system, but it's a significantly longer bill to have it be really clear about if you're, so, you know, if you wanted the bill to say 0 to 3,000 is $25, and then I used another 1,000, let's just say 1,000 gallons at $6, and here's my total. But if I'm a user at 14,000 and we're showing every single tier on their bill, we literally would have to do probably a bill that goes in an envelope with a stamp. So we are looking at, in a sense, adding costs, because those costs would be borne by the water fund, to send a different kind of bill. And I just want to point that out because I think it's something we just need to consider. So it can be done. It's just a question of,
If I could follow up,
Yeah.
it would really help with transparency, that we can show the public what their base and the tiers and stuff like that. Rather than to have an additional value, and I would be great, but rather than have an additional cost to Water Enterprise Fund, maybe there can be other ways, and that's through the quarterly newsletter, to get it posted in the webpage. There's a lot of ways that we could educate the public, and, or at least if we started off, but once there's a comfort level, that's just gonna cause a little turmoil in our community, no matter what number we come up with. And we have to be ready to collectively have one voice when we're done, and we'll probably not agree on 100%, but something that's patable, and then go forward. And I too feel that we've spent a lot of time on it at this point, and there's got to be a compromise. And if it doesn't happen tonight, it's not the end of the world. But this is great dialogue. So Sue, your slight one. What I'd like to be able to do though, is if we could have staff generate that pilot and see what it would generate, because it's got to be more than 126. So you're going to be at the new rate that you're proposing. You're going to be somewhere in about a projected revenue of close to 130,000, 135,000, and then we still have that other additional. I think we all have to agree upon what magical dollar, and that was budgeted at 130. Are we not budgeted for 130? That's why.
total is 147,000.
147. Okay. Do we have the last couple of years? One of the things, as I alluded to earlier, we need a history. And I asked for that when Sue and you and I met, Rena, and that we need to have a history of the last several years.
Didn't I give that to you?
I have
emailed
not
it.
gotten it.
No, I emailed you the 2 audit reports plus the
No.
last.
I had lots of emails from you this week, but as it relates to that particular issue, unless it was longer ago.
No,
or it's
I
hiding-
just, after we met, I had that thing pulled together
No.
and emailed it to you.
No.
actually, I don't think I got it
But
either.
that history, I think, because we're having a snapshot of 1 year.
Oh.
So if we're heading in the right direction and we're having less and less accounted water, which is the right thing to do.
Right.
So the ultimate is to get down to 10%. That's what's projected, or that's what's proposed in the conservation rate, that we get down to 10%. And
Of
it's
the
right in
unaccounted water.
Unaccounted water, and that's right here in the big thing with the DNR.
Well, for the purpose of what this is supposed to cover budget-wise, can we agree on a figure? What is 120,000?
Is what we need to get in on
I mean, can
water
we all agree
sales.
that
On
the
water
income.
sales.
any proposal that we going to?
Well, I think
rather than-
effectively what Rena did, can I just restate it differently and maybe it will be clear? I think we looked at the expenses of 146 and deducted the other revenue that comes in and said, so took off the water tower revenue because that helps fund it, right? So took off those other things, interest income, and said 120,000 is what's left of expenses that has to be generated through fee revenue. The other remaining part, the other 26,000 is coming from other sources, correct?
Through
Great
sales.
concept.
Through sales. You say fee revenue through sales.
Right.
Right.
Great concept, the starting point is too high, Sue.
Okay, then as a council, can we agree on what might be a reasonable revenue reduction or water usage savings to build 5%, 10%, 15%? I mean,
First year, I don't think we can really,
we have to expect something, otherwise we're putting together a plan that
Yeah.
we say is not gonna have any impact.
I mean, if you want to be conservative, we'd say 5%.
Sweet.
but if we're looking
Right.
at revenue going down because we don't have as much sold, so is our costs going down. Not equally, but there's gonna be a lot less
Probably not
costs for-
proportionally,
for
though.
Electricity
Right.
and, there's still gonna be the hard
Chemicals,
costs.
everything, yeah.
But the operating would be less.
So I think if we used 5%, that's pretty small.
That's a realistic number for me.
All right, everybody agree?
A 5% projected
Okay.
revenue
I mean, and then I think we just have to revisit it
Right,
and see
okay.
sort of where it's at and what needs to be adjusted for next year.
Okay, then the other item, Dwayne, I thought you brought up a very good point in that we should have, this enterprise fund should have an operating reserve.
I think that was universal based on, we had a different council member, Randy was there, but I sensed nodding ahead of several of them at that point, and I believe that we're prudent about being good business people, that 50%. Where are we at right now on our reserve?
That's my question.
Oh, sorry, I'll let Rick answer that question, ask the question.
What is the reserve right now?
Well, why she looks that up is,
And if any of it is pledged also, if there's
Well,
something
that's-
that's pledged.
Yeah, part of that stuff.
is,
I mean, some of it is towards debt, I believe, doesn't it?
Yeah, because if it's for the
Right.
remaining water tower over here in Countryside, that still would be coming from this operating, but not the Pleasant Lake.
so why she looks
The
that
water
up?
fund has, 150,000 in cash right now and 90,000 in investments, but, that's,
For debt.
yeah.
So-
The 90 in the investments is for debt.
So then the issue is that adequate reserves for debt payments, and what you're talking about is an operating reserve.
Of,
Yeah.
And that would be the 90?
No, the 90 was actually for the debt. That's in
We
the
have-
investments.
Very little or no operating reserve?
I don't think so, but we'll have to, we got the audit coming up.
Okay.
So you'll have some
that's a
brand new
good one for us
numbers.
to read.
So whatever we discover, I mean, are we in agreement that 6 months, $60,000 is a good approximation
And if it
as a
takes-
goal for an operating reserve?
But if we can't do it all in 1 year.
Oh, no, I'm not suggesting we are,
Conceptually, yeah.
but the goal should be to set aside something towards building that up, and then we can always back off if we.
My question would be, what is the 150 and 90 that you just said
The
that are,
150 is actually in our cash, the checking account right now.
in a checking account right
And
now?
90 is in the investments, in the water fund.
In investments, and that's to cover bond payments,
Yes.
covering expense
Yeah.
for the 90?
Yes.
The 150
That's
is,
your operating stuff that we
Well,
have
that's,
right now.
I mean, I'm a little hesitant to use cash. I mean, typically when you look at a reserve, I'd be looking at fund balance.
Yeah.
To say what is the fund balance, because I mean, we may have cash we've collected, but just haven't sent money out the door yet. I mean, so cash does not necessarily equate to your reserve, at least not
Right.
in my experience.
That's right, yes.
I would
So,
agree with
I think
that,
we'd have
so-
to look at the fund balance, and maybe that's a conversation when our auditors are here, we could have about where we're at in that fund balance, and then looking at the debt and what payments are coming up on that.
And
Yeah.
so to that degree, it's more relevant in the sewer side than in the water, but using it as an
Yeah.
illustration, a lot of people are paying in, but
Right.
yet the city only has an obligation of making that payment for debt retirement bond payments over a
Right.
long haul. So that additional value or additional funding coming in is obviously spearheaded, or, I mean, it's
Right.
pledged.
So if we agree that 5%
50.
revenue reduction as a result of water conservation is reasonable, $60,000 is a goal for an operating reserve, what do we want to build into a time frame to reach the 60,000? Obviously, Dwayne said we don't do 1 year. Should we use 2, 3, 4? For just a goal, I'm just saying, when we develop these tiers, we want to say, when should we make these adjustments for 5% water revenue reduction and a goal of reaching 60,000? And if we want to do that over 4 years, 15,000, should the goal
Not over
be to
5.
have?
Not over 5 years. I think short-term strategic planning would tell most of the times you.
Well,
tie it to maximum.
let's come to an agreement so that
4.
we can help.
I think, well, because my concern, I mean, I would have concern about what it does to the rate. So let's just say 4 years if we do not in fact have money in there, and I think we need to research that, but.
So the goal would be to attempt to build up those reserves over a 4-year period to that magical point of attempting to catch 50% of the operating,
Yeah.
okay?
Rick, how do you feel?
I could
Okay.
agree on that, but we have to know where we're
Right.
starting from.
That's exactly right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
She sounds like Dwayne, or Don, you okay? Okay, so the goal would be to build in 5% water revenue reduction. 4 years, $60,000, that's $15,000. So
Yeah, amortize it.
the goal would be to have, based on the 5% reduction, to have an extra 15,000 over the budgeted 120,000 as a goal. Okay,
I have to point out that the rates that were already in place for 2013, the projected revenue was 117 and it brought in 120. So there was an additional 3,000 already there.
yeah,
And I had pointed out at the open forums and some of the other meetings that when we project expenses of a repairs and maintenance budget that had 25,000 and only $4,000 was spent, there should have been a lot more revenue showing up somewhere. Because those expenses weren't spent. We budgeted $25,000 for repairs and maintenance, but in 2013, there was only $4,500 spent.
yeah. Yeah.
There's over $20,000 that's unaccounted for.
Well, that's where it should create, that's why I think we need to ask, Rick, because it should create money that's sitting in fund balance.
Exactly.
And that, instead of the
So it
snapshot,
may already put us something towards having a reserve.
That's why I want to know where we're starting with.
The actual for 2014 in repairs did exceed the 25,000.
I mean, it could be
I'm
repairs
serious.
and
I'll give you a
maintenance.
It
breakdown.
went from
that could be adjusted.
11,000.
1,000 to
One bad year,
25, yep.
One
I'll
other thing we
show
have
it to you, yeah.
One other thing we have to remember, and that is just because we're starting off and attempting 15,000 each year over a 4-year thing, as we move forward and we see we're either over or under capitalizing, there's still a rate adjustment. That doesn't mean that we're locking in the rate for these 4 years either.
Right.
So each year we review, or every other year, whatever.
Right, and see where
time.
we're at
And
relative
then
to
if that's the
budget.
finance committee that recommends to the board or to the full council that says we need to have this adjustment, so be
Yep.
it. Or have a subcommittee of those people that are on the finance and have a third or fourth person that's involved.
Okay.
May I
Go
just
ahead.
ask Rena
Sure.
one question quick? You just stated that 2014 repairs and maintenance went over 25,000. On December 9th, I got this from you, it
Yeah.
showed 11,513, so there was over $14,000 in
Do you
those.
remember I told you we didn't have the Kramer bill in there? So yeah, I'll give you a
Right,
real
for just a
breakdown.
small excavation.
No, it was-
4,000 and 14,000, so I wanted to break that up to provide, because that's a bulk where it's to provide some incentive to move to a lower, and those in the lower, a disincentive to move into a higher rate. I mean, ideally, you'd have more tiers.
Yeah.
So people have the more, but there has to be a
You'd like
limit.
to have the tiers so that maybe more, start to conserve a little more incentive there. I know what you're saying.
You know, and we could balance this, I mean, if your argument is that maybe that 68% should be split more between, you know, closer to 33, 4, 5% per, and that means more people can move up and down. I'm sure Judy could probably figure something out closer to that to divide up the bulk of people. So again, and back, should we stick with the 20%, or is there an argument that we should follow Minnesota Rural Water and maybe at the high end have a larger increase?
What I still see is all of these tiered plans, you're trying to encourage conservation. I don't project any citizen going out there and keeping track of how much water they're using and say, oh, I better not use any more water because I'm in the lower tier right now. A flat rate plan gives everybody the incentive because they know when they use less, they will pay less. Just like going to the gas station. If you're gonna put in 10 gallons, you're paying for 10 gallons. You get 100 gallons, you pay 100 gallons.
Well, Rick, you can make the same
You
argument.
could the opposite. I know if I use more, I'm gonna pay more. I mean, it's just the opposite argument of what you just said. I mean, if, the way we structured it.
If I could just add one quick footnote.
But I just wanted to answer, even within these tiers, obviously, if you use less water, you're gonna save more, because you're not getting charged, whether it be 275 or 360 or 525. Obviously, you use less water, you're not gonna, for that gallon that you save, you're gonna, or 1,000 gallons, it's gonna be $5.25 left. So it, obviously, because using less water is gonna save money regardless of what the per 1,000 gallon. Go ahead, Dwayne.
And the reaction of how the public is going to achieve or accept this is something that's the unknown. Obviously, they're not leaving town or anything like that, but from the education side, when somebody will come to me after this decision is made and say, Dwayne, why is it that you voted in a particular fashion? I'll share with you the reason that I feel that from 4,000, 15,000, that large, and if it needs to be, those could be skewed, but the cost of getting the gallon of water, it doesn't care where it comes out, it's still the same. That's why I'm trying to say 68% of the total mass that's out there would all be at that same rate. And then that 8% of approximately, if Judy's got it correct, that would be the ones that would be going up from the 530. So it's a dollar and roughly $1. And if those numbers need to be adjusted, we both Sue and I gave Rena and Judy that adjust that wherever we have to make it work out. So that's the reason that I feel that I want to have a large chunk of the masses that would be all paying the same amount for their basic water at that $5.30.
Well, we have to accept the fact that the statute is effectively requiring us to put some sort of water conservation.
We agree, yeah.
And they're recommending it to be a tier structure. And by putting a tier structure in, we can avoid the 30-page document. It all makes sense to have a tiered structure. So back again, just so that we can reduce the number of variables that staff is going to have to deal with. 20% increases is Sue's proposal from 3,000 to 8,000, 20% for the next tier. Do we want it? Does anybody want to see a higher increase at the upper end as recommended by these entities?
A larger
than 20%. They
After
again, they recommend
14,000.
25% on the low end, 50% on the high end, because their argument is that people using water at the high end are
more susceptible to be able to.
the more discretionary water use. It's the
Well, you can-
subdivision that wants to have perfect lawns and the people in it.
So let's go to $10. That's 50, I mean, if you wanna look at $5 as being, then it's 50% more.
Was there a reason that you used 14?
That's because
I see earlier you had 15 and I had 15 and we kind of all agreed upon it that day, 15,000 and now 14. So, till I know.
Rena was, I think because at 15,000, we had like 4% of the residents using more than 15,000. We thought it was an immaterial amount.
No, it'd be 8%, I think.
No,
No, when she did the strata, at 15,000 gallons plus, there was only 4% of the residents. So that, to make it a meaningful amount, I think we went to 14,000.
yeah, I think if you look at this sheet, Dwayne, when we previously had, I think it said 15,000 and over was 3%.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that was sort of the
Yeah,
reason
that was
So
for looking
the
at a change.
finance committee thing.
Trying to look at having, a few more users who fall into those categories, so they're not so.
So what is the feeling of the council on Sue's recommendation, go to 50%, which would be roughly $10 per gallon for users over 14,000 gallons? We're affecting 8% of the residents.
Could hear grumblings, but you want the perfect lawn.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the argument that I kept reading over and over in this literature was,
So you're proposing 0 to 3,000 gallons,
$25.
25, is it?
25 now.
I said 25, yep.
Yeah.
No, I think you had, the proposal written here is 20. And I think that would be fair. Jumping at the 25, I think is not fair. And then your next tier would be 3,001 to
8,000.
8,000.
$6.
Oh, that went this, I had 575, that's now at 6?
$6, yeah.
Well, because I actually did 20% over $5. Comes out to
8,001 to 14,000.
$7.20.
14,000 plus.
$10.
$10.
Now, let me ask you this. If somebody uses, say, 15,000 gallons, they're gonna pay $10 for all 15,000 gallons?
No, it has to be,
Only the gallons over 10, over 14,000?
And that was
Yeah.
clarified last month.
Yeah, it actually goes up. So
it's,
if you used, this is why we wondered, I think we need to be very clear, like putting examples in the newsletter or something about how we're billing, because I think the discussion we had is if you used, so let's say I used 9,000 gallons, I would be charged under mine $25 for the first 3. For my next 5,000 gallons, I'm gonna pay $6 per 1,000. And then for that additional 1,000, I'm gonna pay $7.20. So it tiers up for each 1,000 gallons of when you hit a new tier. So you're not paying for all of your usage, that $7.20, because I'm at 9,000.
And this would be predicated on each 2-month billing cycle.
Right.
So it's not at the end of the year that they went over, right? And that's the fallacy I had in mind originally. I had a high number because it was the
So,
end.
frankly, I actually did a calculation really quick. So Don's example of using 4,700 gallons, unless I did it wrong. So he would have paid under his old bill for 4,700 gallons, I think $35.76. Because he's going to pay $19.08, correct?
1908 is the, yeah.
And then he's
flat
paying
fee.
$3.55.
Yep.
So if I did my math right, it came out to $35.76. Under the new rate, and this is using $25, he's gonna pay $35.20. He'd actually pay less than he's paying currently slightly.
Yeah, it depends
So,
on where you're at. Well,
right.
It's gonna be close.
So,
okay, Rita, do we give you enough to,
Okay, are we, you want one more markup or one more tier thing? From 0 to 3,000 will be $25. 3,001 to 8,000 will be $6 per 1,000 gallons. 8,001 to 14,000 will be $7.20 per 1,000 gallons. 14,001 plus is now $10 per 1,000 gallons.
and then we'll look at that,
Yep.
as well as looking at sort of that whole reserve question and some of that.
That I've got.
Okay.
If I may ask,
Table in action.
if I see an injustice in my numbers, may I also shove, because if we leave it at this and we only have Sue's that we're advancing, I don't want to lose track of the original Sue or the Willenbring proposal or something like that.
Yeah, I
because
withdrew mine though.
well, if you want to eradicate yours and this is your new one, that's fine, that's your stand or something like that. But
Well, because I do think there is logic in terms of saying, I think one, having additional tiers, and secondly, I think having that first tier be something less than 4,000. So,
But you're penalizing them right now with the $25 rate. My mic isn't working, it's flashing here, so
Okay.
that's one of the reasons why we've had this in the past where the mics don't work. They're battery operated, when they run out, they don't work. But you're penalizing people right now. Let's say, like I saw Dave Zwilling here, he was gone, but he's one of these ultra conservative guys. He doesn't use much water, he lives alone, and right now he would pay $22.63 if he's just using 1,000 gallons in 2 months, and he does that. Your proposal would have him paying $25. you're penalizing him for conserving. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. But until we go through this exercise, and then the other thing that I think is very vitally important for me, and that is if we can allow staff to research, and you have that information, and that's on that 5-year history, it just helps me, you know, and that's in the expense side, not the budgeted side, but the 5-year track record of where our expenses have been. Then I can drill in and say, yep, I can see where we need to be. But I think I heard it loud and clear. We're all agreeing that 50% of the operating, and then to get some clarity on the this other dollars. But conceptually, that 5% reduction over four years, each incrementally at 15, and then if we see an adjustment, there might be different people here 4 years down the road, but conceptually, there was the intent of an adjustment coming forward. And we're not that far apart, you know, I think this can be resolved in.
You know, and can I just say, I mean, I think it's really challenging to come up with something that frankly, in the end, everybody is gonna think is fair. So I think we have to come up with something that seems reasonable and move forward with it.
Yeah.
And it might involve compromise to get there. So I just hope we consider that, because honestly, I doubt that we're gonna come up with something that every single person in the city is gonna say, yay, I love what you did. I mean, so I think trying to do something that seems the most reasonable, so.
Just in speaking with the residents and taxpayers that I spoke with, everybody agreed that having a flat rate, knowing exactly what you're gonna pay every 1,000 gallons, everybody understands. I use less, I save money. And like I'm pointing out, with your tiered rates, you don't, there's not anybody that's gonna go out there and keep track. Oh no, I gotta stop, I'm gonna go to the next tier.
Well, I don't think it takes that. I think it's a thinking about how much you use. I mean, I hear what you keep saying, Rick, and I sense most of our conversation is about we're moving to a tiered rate so that we have in fact are meeting the spirit of the conservation rate. So, I mean, I think that that's where we're headed, at least. It seems.
Flat rate,
So.
at least for discussion. We need to get more figures. I agree with Dwayne. We need to see track record of 3, 4, 5 years of expenses. Let's know exactly where we're at. We don't know how much reserve is already there. We don't know how much we need to reach that 60,000. It might be 10,000. It might be already met.
Yeah, that part of it's a different issue. That's part of how
The
much
plus
you-
side, we're not under crisis management where we have lack of water. We still have the pumping capabilities. You know, the worst thing that would happen, I'm reading in here, time of day watering, even odd. I mean, that really makes it complicated. So we are blessed. This decision does not have to be made on an impulse, but we all, I sense, agree that conservation is the right thing to do, irrelevant if it is mandated or not from the DNR or from the state. So I'm looking forward to.
That said, Dwayne, we've
Some
spent
compromise.
4 months on this. and
I know.
This shouldn't be this difficult to come, we're gonna have a lot bigger fish to fry than
I know.
this. And
Well, if you
we
guys would only see my validity in my comments here.
okay. Let's have, any other questions? Otherwise, I think we can get out of here.
So just quickly, if, you know, we'll do up this mock-up with the Sue's
Yep.
proposal. I'll get that information, the 5 years, and once we have that done up, how do you want to proceed from there? Do you want me to just send it out to everybody, or
Please.
or do you want to have an ad hoc committee, like Susan and Dwayne met last month and they talked up some stuff? Do you want them to come back, or?
I
Or
think
not.
send it out and let's see where it's at, and then if it seems like we need to tweak it, I mean, because my goal would be to get something approved at the next meeting so we don't have to keep talking about it. So, I mean, if it seems like we need to come back together, then I'd say,
With it being retroactive to January 1st,
Right.
but people, just so you know, people will not see this until their May billing.
Yeah, and that has to be very clear
Clear.
on our, when we actually document that it's spelled out that says this is for the payment which is in May,
Yeah.
and it's for the water that was used in this day and that day, yes, of course. You know, I think this is the wise thing, if you do that, circulate it to, and then if you see a lot of emails coming back into you from individually from the council members and the mayor, and it looks like it warrants to have it, then contact Sue and myself, and we'll come together for an ad hoc committee. Otherwise, if it's clear and you don't have limited amount of dialogue, all of us individually have the right to call Rena and be polite in using her amount of time. She's coming up to the audit, so pretty soon she'll be busy getting ready for that again. So be vigilant about the amount of time, but I'd be ready, Sue, if you are, if we need that ad hoc
Yep.
committee. I'm ready
Sounds
for an
good.
adjournment.
All right, motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Motion gets made second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same, motion passed.